Morning. I'm with George Ngairi in the studio. I clapped like that and there was a cameraman who almost went down. But it's so good. Welcome, Ngairi.
Thank you for having me, Fred.
Yes, a very sad morning indeed. It's not every day. This is the first time we've ever had sitting CDS basically dying in office. So it is something that quite a number of people are chewing in their mind, trying to come into terms with it. I could see yesterday in Parliament, members of Parliament, when you know rumors started flying that this had happened, they didn't know what to say, how to say it, and they even basically decided that they were going to go on a break.
Yeah, and I think maybe, Fred, I should start on that note by passing my extremely very sincere condolences to the family of General Ogolla and the military officers that also passed away with him, 9 others, including an illustrious son of our great county of Kakamega, Captain Hilary Shirekure, from Navajo sub-county, a local village there called Ingot. He was one of the officers that was in that particular ill-fated chopper and passed along with them, but he was a much younger officer into the service. He hadn't served more than 10 years, he was still in his 30s, but still a gallant son of this nation, a gallant son of our great county of Kakamega, and pass my sincere condolences to his family too, alongside the others on this extremely very sad day. Yes.
It's looking at what the Ogolla had gone to do in that region. That has been a troubled region for a while, and even if you look at the reports from the ground, is that there was a heavy military presence in that area for the entire week, even before he got there, because the military was, even yesterday in the morning, they allege that somebody had been shot within that area. I mean, it's been a very volatile area. So he had gone to see what the military is doing and what they were trying to do to keep, the peace. And then in that mission, he loses his life. Reminds me of several years back when a plane went down in the northeastern parts of the country, where, I think it was almost the Minister for Defense, Godana, went down in a plane there on a more or less similar mission.
Similar circumstances.
Yes.
Indeed, what the late General Ogolla was, the mission that he was there on was a presidential mission.
Yes.
I think many Kenyans would understand that a week back, the president was also in that part of the country. Yes. And in an attempt to address the issues of insecurity in that particular area, he said that he was going to bring in reinforcement of the military, because ordinarily the work of peace and tranquility is largely done by the Kenya Police Service, or in cases where the extreme cases is the General Service Unit, which then takes over from the police to be able to reinforce such missions.
Yes.
But because of the repeated cases of extremism over there, banditry and all those issues that that region has had challenges for many years, the president promised to go over and above to ensure that that place comes into order. You'd understand that place had actually been shut down because the schools that were around there, the students around there had been sent home. So the situation was extremely dire. And so in the eyes of the president, there was need to bring
the big guns.
To bring in the big guns, and obviously that's where the military comes in. And so it was a military operation, and even as we speak now, there were military officers there who are taking part of the reconstruction of the schools which have been destroyed there, and also just to sort of create a new security backup in that particular place, so the kids can come back to school probably in the next 2 or so weeks. And so they were there on a presidential mission, and so him as the Chief of Defense Forces, my assumption would be then he becomes the de facto leader of that mission, even though he might have junior junior officers that are able to be on the ground to be able to protect that. And it might have been one of those one-off trips that he just wanted to check
what was happening,
what's happening there. And then, God's will, and then it happens as it happens.
So there are people who've been saying all kind of things, but it's important to note that this chopper had done quite a number of movement.
Yes.
I mean, this was not because, if you listen to some of the undertones people have already started talking about, questioning, was it sabotage, was it this? This chopper, this was not the first trip he was doing.
Yes.
He had moved from, he had gone to different places in the same chopper.
Yes, a couple of places that he had been, because obviously, as we've explained, he was on a mission to sort of look at what's happening with his officers there, considering now it was a military operation. And he had been to a couple of places, and I think Kenyans who didn't have a background information of what happens there. I had some saying, legitimately so, and you can say that when you lose someone, you're angry and you're frustrated, you might end up saying some of these things. So some of them were saying, what was the Chief of Defense Forces doing supervising a school, which is something that should be done by a CDF committee.
Yes.
But they failed to understand that they were on a special presidential mission.
And it's the army that was actually repairing and rebuilding the schools.
Because it's a special presidential mission. The president said that the situation as it stands now is extremely dire, and the local police officers and the GSU service officers that were there has since haven't quite been able to achieve much in that particular region. The whole of Kerio Valley, is a huge stretch from Baringo going all the way to Turkana. And so they were there because of a special mission, and so he wasn't going there to supervise a school like a CDF officer.
Yes.
He had his officers were there, and since it's a presidential mission, he is a presidential appointee. So then I guess in the spirit of trying to ensure that the presidential instructions are adhered to, he might have chosen to go around, and as you rightfully mentioned, he was in a couple of places before the ill-fated incident of the chopper coming down. And so probably we need to work on communication, because he was validly there based on the circumstances of what happened prior to that.
And he had actually participated in, had gone, seen the officers who are leading the mission, the boots on the ground, what they were doing, the schools that you're saying, and he was going now to the, what you can call the front line of where the operation is happening. And the chopper came down.
Yeah, exactly, and it's part of what they're actually supposed to achieve in that particular area. Remember, it's not just the environment, but it's the people and the welfare of the people of that particular community, which then brings in the leadership, the local leadership there, and the education system there. Because of the school situation, most of the kids around that place has been sent home. So it was a tough situation. So you have to address everybody, and it means then you engage yourself comprehensively in the activities of that particular place. He wasn't just going there to see the officer, or not only his officer, but the people that the officers are serving. So it is expected that he was going to engage in the many other issues that ordinarily people wouldn't consider as part of his mandate, which is really what you would see in the social media, what people are talking about. But many of them is because they hadn't had a background information of what had happened before.
And I guess some of this talk is coming out of the thinking and a bit of history between the late general and this regime, because you can remember during the election, Chebukati had said that General Gola was one of the people who had gone to see him, trying to have the elections reversed. And the president, when he appointed him, he surprised so many people. He had said, he wanted to make sure everything, the past remains the past, and we are professional. This guy deserves to be in the place he is. And he says, they are going to work together, and that's the reason why he appointed him, despite what had been said in the past. And I guess that's where all these what you can call fertile imaginations of people is coming from.
And but Fred, you need to understand this. Up until today, all those allegations, remember what people do not understand, whenever it comes to that moment that you want to declare presidential results, is a national security issue. And rightfully, all the members of the National Security Council, which includes the Chief of Defense Forces and the Inspector General of Police, are interested parties legally by virtue of their jobs on what happens at, in this context, the Bomas area.
Yes.
That's why if those would be those Kenyans who have had an opportunity to be around that place as I have, on that particular place, it's usually, you have almost 1,000 GSU officers in that particular place, because it's a very serious national security issue. So ordinarily, it wouldn't surprise you to see the Inspector General of Police there and the security commandants, the Chief of Defense Forces, because a lot is at stake at that particular moment. Fred, you must remember that you can win an election, but if you're not there to collect your certificate, you are not yet a president. And you can actually be handed over a certificate, but if you do not show up for the taking of oath at Kasarani, you're not yet a president. Even if you show up at the stadium, it's a legal process. Because up until the moment that you're able to take that oath, you're not a president, and a lot can happen in such a situation. So in such incidences where you are the oath-taking process, or where they're declaring presidential elections, is a serious national security issue, and a lot is at stake. And ordinarily, it wouldn't be a surprise to see the Chief of Defense Forces
the main controversy, if you can remember, is what Chebukati said, that he was among a number of senior top officials in the country went to him trying to influence him to change the results. So his appointment as the Chief of Defense Forces came as a surprise to many people, because they thought when the president takes over the realms of government, then this gentleman was basically going to be seen.
And I was heading to that particular point. I was telling you that up until today remains Chebukati's opinion. It does not become a statement of fact. It is an opinion he gave, and he said, based on what happened, this is what happened. It was his word against the rest of the Kenyans. The rest of the Kenyans could have a different opinion. And be as it may, that was said, and the general perception of the public was that then this is what transpired, and their mission in that particular place was for the purposes of being able to turn around the results. But I'm explaining to your listeners and to our viewers actually, is that ordinarily you shouldn't be surprised to see an Inspector General of Police and the Chief of Defense Forces in such an operation, because it's a serious national security issue. But as things turned out, that is what actually former IBC Chairman Wafula Chebukati said, and it was picked up by the public, and for those that actually support the president, they bought that. And so in their minds and this government, they believed that this was part of their mission, and of course then the appointment, his father appointment as a Chief of Defense Forces came as a surprise, because then they expected him to politically be pushed out. Even though he had never, there is nowhere where the Chief of Defense Forces was given a platform to defend himself, or any particular specific investigations that were partaken to be able to prove that his trip to Bomas was actually to turn around the election results. They could have gone there just by virtue of his work and his position to do that. But yes, it's true. Then that was the statement that Chebukati did, and so it carries a very serious impact on how the kind of perception that can be taken on this, but on his demise. Because he didn't die peacefully in his bed. He has died in extremely tragic circumstances that could put a lot of question marks by virtue of his position. I had people say, and validly so, is that when you look at the layers of seniority that you have in the military, for such a small operation that wasn't a national-wide operation, you wouldn't ordinarily expect to have the Chief of Defense Forces there. Not even a Lieutenant General, not even a Major General or a Colonel, maybe even not a Brigadier, you know, because it was just a small military operation in a very local thing. The country was not at war. But I believe that he was there because of the presidential assignment that had been made by the president a week before when he was there. And I think out of good faith, then he chose to be there. And things
to go and lead the forces.
To go and lead the forces. Fred, the Kenyans need to understand the kind of security intelligence and preparation that goes around the security of a Chief of Defense Force is almost equal to what the president gets.
True.
Because militaries are the ones that actually sustain governments or take out governments. It's a very serious position. And for you to be at such a level, it means that you have access to almost every kind of intelligent information that you can have. By the time you even decide to do a trip, a trip of a chief of defense forces is just managed as the way you manage a presidential trip.
Yeah. And this is done by the military.
It's done by the military, which is really the organ I'm telling you, can decide the fate of any country. And so you wouldn't want to imagine that a chief of defense force would, especially in a terrain like the one that we're talking about, Kerio Valley, which has been like that for almost 60 years now. And it's a place where anytime you plan, even an ordinary Kenyan, forget even the chief of defense, even just you, if they tell you we're going to Suguta Valley, you have to think through your trip and all the kind of possibilities, the security threats that might arise on the way. So I would want to assume even for the chief of defense forces that was a priority, and they must have captured that in full, they must have captured that completely before they made the trip. And him having been a pilot, you know, he's been a pilot for over 40 years. He's an experienced guy. He's had the privilege of really getting international trainings, and he's extremely exposed on such matters.
He was really qualified for what
qualified. When you look at the history from the day he joined the armed forces, and as a junior pilot, and the kind of trainings that he's had globally in the UK, in the US, he's obviously somebody that is extremely, he would actually see this aircraft as a problem himself, even if he doesn't need to be told by whoever was flying the chopper that particular time. So I don't want to believe by virtue of his training and his experience as even as a professional pilot, because he's not just a military officer, that he would board a chopper that his instincts would tell him that they're not looking very well. You know, so he might have been convinced that all issues have been looked into, including his personal threats to his personal security. But be as it may, we are here now, and then he's left.
I've looked at the history of the Huey, the helicopter. It's a very hardy helicopter. Was used in Vietnam. Very, very hardy. It's one of those, it's like a Land Rover when it comes to helicopters. Able to handle very, very rigorous you know, situations and circumstances. We're using it. So it's a very dependable chopper. It's got a very good history from built by the US. So I'm very sure, knowing what they do with crashes, that you will have US officials coming to, you know, check on maybe the black box to see what could have cost the chopper to go down. You remember the Eurocopter that went down with Saitoti? We had some of the experts from the country that did the chopper basically coming to check what could have cost this. It's a very hardy helicopter.
There's no doubt about the specs of that chopper and what it's capable of doing. But I think I just checked on the history of that chopper, is that it was procured somewhere in around 2016. It might have been a second-hand chopper, you know.
It's definitely second-hand. The Huey,
might have been a second-hand chopper, you know. Probably
maybe they refurbished and all that. But it's a very, the Huey is a very old chopper.
Exactly, and so the Kenyan government.
But it's still being used by militaries around the world.
There's no doubt about the design. Fred, you can buy a Range Rover 2014 and 2015, but 30 years from now, depending on how you handle it, it's still a good car, but maintenance and other factors come into play, and
true.
it can fail at some point. So there's no doubt about the specs of the chopper and what it can do in terms of performance. But this particular one was actually acquired in 2016.
So it's an old machine.
It's a very old machine. Acquired by the Kenyan government around 2016. So probably it has been in use for about 8 years now, if you loosely do count the number of years between 2016 to today. And then there's also a factor of maintenance. You know, Kenyan government and the procurement system and the lackluster, you know, attitude that goes into how they manage government affairs. It's possible that here and there you could even have issues. I'm not saying that's the particular issue, but there could be mechanical issues that probably were overlooked. I mean, that's why the plane went down. But also it could also be an issue, the chopper. That's why the chopper went down, but also it could be an issue, maybe the experience of whoever was
I'm very sure when it comes to the experience of the person flying the Chief of Defense Forces.
I was listing the options. The third one could be a bad day in office.
Yes, it just happened, an accident.
It could be
just happened, yeah.
You could be a pro in whatever thing that you're doing, but on that particular day, you're not up to it.
Because I remember when Osama bin Laden was being taken out in Pakistan, something happens.
Yes.
You know, some of the best helicopters in the world are done by Americans.
Yes.
And this had not been seen in public because there were what you can call, they had a way where they could evade radar.
Yes.
But one of them went down at the residence where Osama bin Laden was being taken out. And he wasn't hit. They just say it's just weather, in the sense that the chopper got to a place where it couldn't find enough wind to give it lift. So it just came down. So things happen. I know of a story that I was told of a missionary. And the person who was telling me this was in the Cessna plane. Going to Turkana. And on their way there, so you know how Cessna planes are, the missionary was seated, the Kenyan pastor who had brought in the missionary was seated up front with the pilot, and then the rest of the people behind. And then they hit what they called a pocket where it's like there's no, the plane has no lift, and it goes down like a rock. So it hit like around 10 meters, just going down, whoop. And during that time, the gentleman who was seated next to the pilot, the pastor, basically jumped and grabbed the pilot. And immediately after the pilot regained control of the plane, that pastor was told, you, enda huko nyuma kabisa, ukae huko. So you see, so many things can happen, even to a perfectly fit plane.
The reason why, Fred, they call incidences as accident, it means it was beyond your control. I don't think anybody can wish to, if you're a driver, there's nobody who wishes to ram behind a truck and die. It's because it's assumed that as a licensed driver is that you've gone through the training and you understand how to handle a motor vehicle, and also in terms of road safety, you're trained to be able to read the signs and all this stuff. But people still have accidents because at that particular moment, for whatever reason,
you could be beyond your control now.
Beyond your control, and then you find yourself in situations where you are badly injured, or in worst case scenario like the issue of our Chief of Defense Forces, then you lose life alongside the many other officers who are actually not being mentioned, the 9 others as well, who are also serving this country as military officers. And these are the kind of jobs that when you take them out of passion, because you require to be a patriot to take such jobs. For you to be a police officer, to be a teacher, to be a medical doctor, I tend to believe those are careers that you can't just wake up because of money. Because even if you love money, how do you operate someone's head without knowing, without knowing? It's quite a Herculean task. I might love the doctor's salary, but do you know what it takes to open somebody's brains and look into it and then take the brains back to Keka? It's not a joke, you know. So there are those jobs that you do out of passion. So obviously the 9 others also take the same route. Ogola might have been the more experienced one because the rest are juniors, but then they're on a mission to serve the country. And
now I know in the mind of the president, there's a lot of things that are going on. The political brains in this country have already started playing things in their mind, in as far as, because you cannot have that position remaining vacant. Already the president knows. I know Tonje had come up with set of rules on how succession within the military is supposed to take place. But now this general has did not even complete the first year. He was days short of his first anniversary in office. So basically it's supposed to be on a rotational basis, goes to the Army, Navy, Air Force. So now what happens? Does the deputy come up.
Naturally, in any position, Fred, you expect as the deputy to succeed.
Yes.
To succeed the boss.
Yes.
From a deputy here, I'll be looking forward to succeed.
Yes.
You know, it's natural. So
yes.
you obviously expect Major General Kahariri, who has been appointed as the deputy VCD, to take over from General Ogola, and then of course there's a replacement for the deputy VCD, then who comes from the based on the formula, the rotational formula, either from the Navy or from the Air Force, which is next. Not office, the Kenya Army, where we have now a newly appointed Davis Tarus, who's the commandant now of the Army Commandant, who is next in line after the Navy, if the rotation is to go like that.
Okay.
So just before the appointment of the these are newly appointed commandants, so they haven't served even in their current position more than a month. It should be a couple of weeks back, a month or two or so back. So we have also a new commandant of Navy who wasn't the one in the line of succession, because there was a guy there called Jimson Kimtai. Jimson Kimtai is a Pokot from somewhere in Kapenguria. They have served in Navy for many years, an experienced officer, but he has been seconded to go and serve as the Vice Chancellor of the National Defense University. He was supposed to be the next VCD. He could have very easily been the person that is to inherit the late General Ogola. But the president, in his wisdom, he's given him another assignment, so we have another player there. So the president has a very dicey situation, because he has to balance this based on how General Ogola has exited. You know, had he retired peacefully and gone home, it would be easy to manage that succession. But such a tragic death with a lot of questions around it, by virtue of his status. Remember, nobody's talking about the other 9 people. We're all talking about Ogola. It's not because the other people are not special, but it's because of the position that Ogola holds and the political angles to it in terms of succession. Fred, this is a country that is struggling with the issue of bad politics and ethnicity. These are all factors that we're struggling with, and corruption as well. And I think in the course of this president trying to work out his mathematics on how he's going to replace General Ogola, because he has to be replaced, and it has to be soon. I doubt if it would go beyond a week, because a country cannot lack its chief of defense force. So I'm sure he must be looking at, how do I balance this out? Remember, General Ogola is living behind the VCD, Charles Kahariri, a gentleman from Nyeri County I did mention before, and then he's living behind the Navy Commandant, who is Thomas Nganga Njoroge as well, comes from the same region, and then we have David Tarus as well as the Army Commandant, and John Omenda from Vihiga County, you know, the Western region.
Hey, Mbaka, your hands went up from Vihiga County.
The Western region, obviously, as a commandant of the Air Force. You know, one of the issues that my Governor George Natembe has been telling our people is that, when are we ever going to see a Westerner being a chief of defense forces? Maybe, but out of a sad situation, maybe this could be the time, the chance for us to witness, because there's a Kenyan too, and he's a citizen. He has a right to serve. He has served for many years.
So if since he did not finish his term, does it mean that somebody from the same branch of the defense forces he had come from is going to come and complete the term?
I doubt whether that is it must be that way. But if that had to be the case, then it means it's a 4-year term for the Air Force.
Yes.
And General Ogola has just served 1 term. So then you have 3 years to go for that particular term. I think then John Omenda, who's the current commandant of Air Force, then sits at a very strategic position to be able to replace that. And even when you look at
because the General Ogola came from the Air Force.
He came from the Air Force, that's what I'm saying. So based on what you're alluding to, is that if that's the case, then, and he's only served a year, he has 3 more years.
Actually, he didn't even finish a year.
It's less than a year. So then it means you still have 3 more years to go for the Air Force to serve that particular position. Then John Omenda, who is the current commandant of Air Force, then sits in a very strategic position. But also, when you look at the ethnic arithmetic of that top 3-4 top line positions, actually there are 5, because you have then the Chief of Defense Forces, then you have the Vice, and then the 3 commandants, the Air Force, and then when you look at that matrix there, then John Omenda sits at a very strategic position. But you see, the president has a leeway to even transfer this one here, the same way Nganga is the same way Gibson Mutai was moved from the Navy and to go be the Vice Chancellor of the university, the National Defense University. He can still do the same and be able to move some people around and be able to balance off, because this particular one, his exit, you see, is a tragic one for General Ogola. Had it been that he served his term and retired peacefully, there might have not been so many questions. I'm sure the president is very aware of it, and he's also, the president is on Facebook too. Yes, he's also listening and
he's seeing what people are claiming and alluding.
The president is on Facebook. He's a pseudo. He has a pseudo account on Facebook where he stays there. So when Akothe tweets, the president is reading too. So alongside the almost 30 million Kenyans that we have online, so I'm sure he's also engaging the public, and that's the beauty of social media, which probably the other president didn't have, because nowadays you don't really need as a leader, Fred, you don't really need to get the sycophants like the ones Nyayo had, Kamodo and all these guys who had to bring the report to the president. The president can actually just check and be able.
It's an open book.
It's an open book, and he quickly has an idea of what's happening on there. So I think one of the things that we'll be trying to see is to balance the politics and the optics of it, and also be able to ensure that the image, the worst place you can have a debate on ethnicity, Fred, is in the military service. Because it can destroy a country. That's the challenge.
And unfortunately, unfortunately or fortunately, whichever way you look at it, Governor Natembeya has been really hitting that home.
So much.
As in, it's become his pet subject.
And that's why
the military, and he talks about the Luyas. Yes, he says the other groups, including the Somalis, have had their their sting at the top of the military, and the Luya nation has not had. You know, Fred, and you know, a lot of people, even though a lot of people are just speaking of Governor Natembeya in the context of the Western region and the Luya people, but that message cuts across many of the other communities that serve in this military. Remember, when they do the military recruitments, Fred, they don't just do from one region. They do from across the 290 constituencies. Actually, they even go into the wards sometimes when you're presenting the names, because you apply using your ID. You know, the other day when President William Ruto was appointing the CAS, we had a situation with Ketu Aruguru, the former women rep of Laikipia. You know, she's a native of Nyeri County, I think around Karatina there. That's where she comes from. But she's a migrant of Laikipia. She migrated, her family migrated into Laikipia. So on her ID, she's a native of Nyeri. So when she was making an application for that position, you know, you apply based on where you're coming from. It has to tally. So she applied as a native of Nyeri County. So when she was appointed, there was a massive debate, because then in justifying to the Public Service Commission is that this is a balanced recruitment process. She had to come in as a representative of Nyeri, and there was a fight there, because people are saying, this Ketu Aruguru, she comes from Laikipia, but how comes she's from this particular area? So in the military service, we have people from across all communities that are serving there, and some of them have served for very, very many years, and might, you know, raise issues where they're saying, why are we not growing in this particular portfolio? So the message that Natembeya is passing is actually not just for that Western region. Isn't it a dangerous,
extremely,
a very dangerous conversation for him to be having in the public the way he's doing? Because he's sowing seeds into the military of that discontent.
Fred, he's not sowing seeds. It can be seen. Because just before General Ogola, we had Kabochi. Before Kabochi, we had Mwathethe. But before Mwathethe, we had General Karangi. All these are guys from around the same community. And as we speak today, the president's latest...
Mwathethe is from
Kilifi.
Yes, it's from Coast.
Kilifi.
Yes.
In between, I'm saying how soon the next person came in is that just after Karangi, then you had Kabochi. All these are coming from the same community. And then when you look at the recent appointments by the president, again, we have a vice chief of defense forces from the same region, who then is almost being succeeded, but because naturally Navy then should bring the next chief of defense forces. And the person who's sitting in the Navy now is Thomas Njoroge. If we are based on the Tonje rules, is actually the person that is supposed to replace General Ogola. Anybody that looks at it like that will have an issue with the ethnic representation of that. Remember, it's not just an option. It's not just an opinion. It's a constitutional requirement that the government of Kenya and all departments must have the face of Kenya. You understand? So they might not be enforcing it because of the politics that are around it and the issue of us in government and those not in government. But when you go to a local communities in the south who have no chance of ever being in such position, they would easily buy such a message as to what Natembeya has done. And the president can easily save us that direction by just making sure that he can get people that he likes from the other areas and put them there. Because Fred, when you look at what the tragedy of what Somalia became is an issue of tribes and clans. Actually, it's a clan issue.
But at the same time,
Yes.
At the top of the defense forces, you just don't want to put somebody there to balance the tribal matrix.
Yes.
You want to have somebody there who, in case of anything, in case of war, in case, this is a very competent person who can be able to do that. So I think when it comes to the military, playing the tribal card becomes a very sensitive thing. Whether it's pro the powers that be or pro the other group, it is a very sensitive thing.
Fred,
you put whoever is competent
You are right,
to be there.
but you're ignoring a fact that the Kenya Defense Forces is a public institution funded by taxpayers' money.
True.
The money that funds KDF and the entire security service, you know, the GSU, the Air Force, and the police service, it comes from all Kenyan taxpayers. It's not just from one particular area. And so it's unfortunate then, and you're right when you say in terms of loyalty and the kind of person that you want to have in that particular position. It's just that it's unfortunate that the basis of trust is based on ethnicity. Because then, Fred, when you have a country that has now 45 communities, we were 42, then we are the Indians, then we are the Makondes, and then there's somebody else around here who has showed up. There's a community there. There's a community that showed up, I think there are about 5,000 people. They come from Zimbabwe. Shona. They're called Shona. We have a community here.
They just showed up.
They showed up and they say they're part of Kenyans, you know. So now we're talking about 45 communities, right? Validly gazetted as communities in Kenya.
Yes.
And they pay taxes, they pay VAT, they pay excess duty, so they fund this system.
Yes.
So it's just unfortunate that while you're rightly fully saying that you want to, anybody, including me, I'm a businessman, I'd like to have employees that serve my interest. I wouldn't want somebody that we're competing. So the president then definitely, of course, any president would want to have a very loyal CDF. It's just that it's unfortunate that ethnicity is a matrix that you use to measure that loyalty, because then you're exposing the country. The day, Fred, and you're saying what Natembeya is putting across, the day the rest of the country will pick it, then we'll get back to the situation that we had in 2007, where you had a political class with personal selfish interest, but whose acts have an implication on a regular guy who's minding his business elsewhere. The people you saw the trouble that we had in the Rift Valley, where people were haunted in Eldoret because somebody had committed a crime elsewhere, whom they've never met, they've never seen, they don't even know how he looks like. And they did not make a mistake by going to choose him, because that, the same way, the way Fred has said this for years, that you are free to choose whoever you want.
Nobody's wrong.
It's not a mistake. The same way in the Kiambaa church in Eldoret, the people that went to vote, it's the same way those of us in Kakamega, we went to vote. So if we're saying they made a mistake, then we also made a mistake to choose whoever we chose. You understand? So we had a situation where a section of elite politicians were making decisions without paying attention to the political implication, because politics is about optics, Fred. I could mean well in the things that I'm doing, but the kind of people that I put in as the face of that particular thing might have a different perception elsewhere, yet I mean well. So this president has to put that into mind, because if there's one thing, Fred, that can become a major subject of the next 2027 election, might be this issue of ethnicity. Because that one, it becomes very hard to escape. You know, in every election, Fred, we've said this many times, is that there's always the major issue in that particular election. 2002 was Kanu must go. You understand? 2013 we had the issue of ICC. You know, last 2020 election we had the issue of dynasty. That's why President Uhuru Kenyatta, he could not escape the issue of dynasty, because he's a former Sons president, they've been in power for decades. So even when he carried billions and billions of shillings of development money to central Kenya, it didn't work, because the overlying issue never changed. The idea was that dynasties must go. So you do not want to have an election where the main subject is ethnicity. And people can see, Fred, if you look at the cabinet, 22 cabinet secretaries. Half of them, which is 11, are from the president and deputy president's community. If you look at the 51 PSs, we have about 14 PSs from, I think it's an interchange of, half of 51 is I think around 26. There's a 13, 14 in between the president and the deputy president. If somebody was just to pick that matrix and go around it across the country, Fred, I can assure you then would have a very serious issue going to that election, because that breeds hatred. I might not be benefiting anything from that, but the issue of just representation.
Yes.
That's why there's some people who's mourning, like now the issue of General Gola. There are people in the streets I saw the other day, yesterday, sorry, in the evening, who are mourning way more than even the family of Ogola, because they are ethnically attached to it. Somebody saying, no, sasa wameua mtu yetu, is an allegation.
Yes.
So you don't want to have such issues. So I hope the president, when he's particularly in the military, because if the military slips, there is no country that has survived where the military has split.
Yeah.
Not in Somalia, not in South Sudan, not in Sudan. Because you know what happened in South Sudan is between the Dinka and the Nuer.
Yeah.
And that's how they split the country. But before that, it was between the blacks and the Arabs.
Yes.
So they split, the Arabs out of their country, then the blacks remained with their country. But even when they remained with their country, then now we started looking at, we're all black, but which type of black? So the Nuer are fairly lighter than the Dinkas, who are from the other side, where General General Garang. No, Garang is a Nuer. He's a Salva Kiir's community. But the other guy, the vice president, I keep forgetting his name. But the general, Riek Machar. Yeah, from the other side. You know, those are usually they're considered as the Luos of, when you trace the history of where Luos came from. They came from that particular area, that big trip of migration. So you don't want to have a country where you have a military that is being addressed based on ethnic issues. If there's one place we should save and protect, then it should be in the security service. We can play it in these other administrative areas, but that one, because if that one collapses, then we don't have a country.
All right.
Yes.
And we got to bring the curtains down in the show. There's a conference that is going on at Redeemed Gospel Church, Buruburu, a youth conference.
Yes.
That has already started.
Yeah.
There are a lot of things that are going to be done, basically to look at the issues of the young people during a time like this.
Yes.
And we'll be airing that later on shortly, just showing people what's happening, the launch, and then a lot of activity. And young people, wherever you are, you can come and attend the conferences. There's a lot of great stuff going on, great artists, great speeches, talks concerning the life today and how you can be able to navigate the current age, because that is very important. So shortly we'll be going there. But as we bring this down, there's need for sobriety.
Absolutely.
As discussions are being made. I know the National Defense Council is definitely involved in this. And we are going to probably hear the person who's going to replace the general, maybe announced by the president.
Shouldn't take long, and I hope the president, as he does so, he pays attention to all the angles to it, because of the interest that the Kenyans have in this particular session. So this particular situation, because obviously by the nature of the kind of exit the general has had, and as he does so, I hope he does it in the interest of the country, because then it will serve all of us for now and for many years to come. Let's continue just praying for that family. I think it's very, very important that we pray for that family. Losing a father, as a country, we may be talking about the Chief of Defense Forces, but there's somebody who's talking about my husband. There's somebody who's talking about dad. There's somebody who's talking about grandpa, my brother, so he's not just the Chief of Defense Forces. He's a father, he's a son to somebody, he's a brother to somebody, he's a husband to somebody. And so we now pray for the family, and we ask the Lord to grace that family, to give them grace to be able to bear this very heavy burden, and to heal them very fast as they face this. I know the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ is sufficient for them as they go through this. So we pray for you, and we pray that the Lord is going to give wisdom to the country and to the leadership as they navigate this situation. Well,
We got to bring down the curtains now. Do have yourself a lovely morning. Remember, later on in the show, we have Daughters of the Kingdom. We'll be talking about matters, daughters in the kingdom. And then later on, we see how the day is going to go by, but it's going to be beautiful. Do have yourself a lovely morning.